Welcome. Welcome to our annual Holocaust commemoration. I'm your host tonight. I'm Sarah Ducey. I am Paul Peck Humanities Institute Director, and I'm really glad you're here. Our annual commemorations began in 1998 with Dr. Myrna Goldenberg, the founding director for our Paul Peck Humanities Institute. I want you to know that Montgomery College is committed to teaching the Holocaust, and this commemoration is a part of that work. We offer the Portraits of Life Holocaust Survivors of Montgomery County photographic exhibition and a Holocaust Survivor Speakers Bureau. We have our annual Bella Mishkinsky lecture, and we do a variety of other programs, including teacher education. I want you all to know that this is a solemn event, but not without beauty. During our candle lighting ceremony, you will meet Holocaust survivors that live in our region. We have some poetry readings for you, and we have music. And we hope that the music and the poems help you to think and to feel, and also to nourish your spirit as you really accommodate some pretty hard truths. Additionally, you have the great honor of hearing witness testimony by Holocaust survivor Peter Siegel. I want to thank all the people that have made this evening possible. And I just want you to know that we can't do this alone. And we have some credits at the tail end of the system so that you'll see that. But I want to welcome you. And in this moment, I have the pleasure of introducing to you our Senior Executive Vice President, Sanjay Rai. If you wait a moment till I can advance him to our spotlighted. Here we go. Dr. Rai.
Good evening. I'm so honored to welcome all of you to annual Holocaust commemoration at Montgomery College. Each year, this event is a solemn reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the space of unspeakable evil. Our purpose tonight is to recognize the strength and dignity of those who survived the terrible events of the Holocaust, and to honor those who were lost by name so that they are never forgotten. Today, as news of war in Europe dominates headlines once again, our responsibility is to remind ourselves of the tragic human cost of organized greed and hate. Within our own country, we are seeing efforts to erase history and to silence the voices of victims of oppression. Montgomery College's Holocaust commemoration represents our community's commitment to telling these stories so that we never forget. Thank you to the county leaders who are supporting education and awareness, including Council Member Gabe Albornoz, Council Member Marilyn Balcom, Council Member Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, Council Member Andrew Friedson, Council Member Sidney Katz, Council Member Laurie Ann Sellis, Council Member Kate Stewart, Council Member and Chief of Staff Beth Schumann, Chief of Staff Lisa Mandel Trump, Special Assistant Jackie Rivera-Owen, Vice President of Montgomery County Board of Education, Carla Silvestri, former Director of County Department of Correction and Rehabilitation, Arthur Wallenstein. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank those representing the Paul Peck Humanities Institute, Dr. Fiona Glade, Sarah Ducey, and Ken Jesse for their continued leadership and for tonight's program. Thank you again all for joining us tonight and for this incredibly timely and important event.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. We'll have a candle lighting ceremony, and I want to help the audience know what to expect. I'm simply going to ask each Holocaust survivor to tell us a bit about who they're remembering. They'll light a candle, hold it up, and tell us about their loss and their remembrance.
My name is Peter Feigl, and this evening I would like to remember my parents, Agnes and Ernst Feigl, and my aunt, Annemarie Feigl, who all three were killed in Auschwitz camp.
Today, I would like to remember my parents who were killed in Croatia, former Yugoslavia, and then Croatia during the Holocaust. And I would also like to remember my grandparents and the rest of my fairly large family of aunts and cousins, uncles, who also lost their lives during that period.
My name is Louisa Lawrence Israels. I'm from the Netherlands, and today I remember the more than 70 relatives that I never had a chance to know because they were murdered during the Holocaust.
My name is Manny Mandel, and I remember my relatives and all those others for whom there's no yahrzeit, and this is a candle for them. Zichronam Levracha.
My name is Helena Yasher of Peabody, and I would like to remember mainly my mother, first of all, because she was so brave and saved my little baby sister and me, and just all through the Holocaust was able to lead us out of this horrible, horrible situation, and we survived. I would also like to remember my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and all the other relatives who I didn't even get a chance to meet. I was just too young. And thank you for making this possible for me here to remember them.
My name is Nat Shafir. I'm a Holocaust survivor from Romania. I'm remembering 32 members of my extended family who were murdered by the Nazis during the Holocaust.
Hi, my name is Robert Teitel. I'm an orphan child survivor from Holland. I would like to memorialize my parents, Abraham Teitel and Claire Donsbach, and the other members of my extended family whom I have never known.
I would like to remember tonight my grandfather, my uncle, and all the rest of the big extended family that perished in Croatia during the Holocaust.
My name is Josie Traum, and I am from Belgium. I would like to memorialize my grandparents with this candle. My maternal grandparents, Rivka Lea Orenburg and Benjamin Orenburg, who were both murdered in Auschwitz. I would also like to remember Freddie Traum, my husband's parents, Gita Traum, and Eliyahu Traum.
We're now going to hear a poem. This is one of 3 poems you'll hear this evening. They were all written by children who were in a camp. Most of the children died in that camp. We don't think that these children survived. Their poems do, and we honor them by reading them. Yael will read Closed Town by Anonymous.
Everything leans like tottering, hunched old women. Every eye shines with fixed waiting, and for the word when. Here there are few soldiers, only shot down birds tell of war. You believe every bit of news you hear. The buildings now are fuller, body smelling close to body, and the garrets scream with light for long, long hours. This evening I walked along a street of death. On one wagon they were taking away the dead. Why have so many marches been drummed here? Why so many soldiers? A week after the end, everything will be empty here. A hungry dove will peck for bread. In the middle of the street will stand an empty, dirty hearse.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Yael. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful poem. For those here tonight who have not studied the Holocaust before, I want to provide at least a little bit of context and background information so that the discussion, including from our feature speaker that follows, will make a little bit more sense. According to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. The World Holocaust Remembrance Center and Museum in Israel, Yad Vashem, also adds that Jews were not the only victims of Hitler's regime, but that they were the only group that the Nazis sought to destroy entirely. Of course, the Holocaust could not have happened but for the long, sordid history of anti-Semitism, sometimes referred to as the longest hatred. Anti-Semitism can be defined or refers to prejudice or discrimination against Jews based on their religious beliefs and or group stereotypes, unquote. Anti-Semitism dates back at least to the establishment of Christianity as a major religion more than 1,500 years ago, where Jews would be seen as untrustworthy or even dangerous. And this led to episodes of violence against them during times of crisis. For example, wars like the Crusades, the plague in the 14th century, and so forth. Later on, by the 18th and early 19th centuries, Jews were often looked at as politically, socially, economically, and culturally different and discriminated against for those reasons. Major changes occurred in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with the popularity of pseudoscientific studies of race, leading to a scale of hierarchy based on different races, understanding races as being in competition with each other for supremacy. So even before 1933, when Hitler came to power, already there was a mindset, even before there was a plan, that certain peoples were seen or deemed inferior and therefore potentially subject to extermination. Today, as we know, anti-Semitism is on the rise globally. It has appeared visibly right here in Montgomery County, Maryland, appearing with alarming frequency in schools. The Anti-Defamation League was founded more than a century ago to inform about and combat anti-Semitism and other similar doctrines fostered by hate groups. The ADL's approach to anti-Semitism is three-part: investigate, advocate, and educate. Today, we're mainly doing the latter, the education part. And you are tasked with doing the former two. And you can certainly go to the ADL website to find much useful information and resources to inform yourself. Montgomery College, and you could take a lot of time to go over this, I'm just going to do it briefly, but Montgomery College has been involved and committed to Holocaust education for quite some time, as you can see. As with tonight's Holocaust commemoration, which, as Sarah had mentioned, first started in 1998. There's the Portraits of Life program, which I'm very much involved with, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. We have the annual Bella Mishkinsky lecture, which was given last fall by Robert Teitel, who's with us tonight. We arrange for Holocaust survivors to speak at different venues, particularly schools and community centers, places of worships. We organize and sponsor teacher trainings, poetry workshops, anti-bias training, and so forth. So as you can see, we're very much involved and engaged. So for many productive years of my career, I have been deeply involved with portraits of life, Holocaust survivors of Montgomery County, Maryland. Portraits of Life is, first of all, an exhibition of not quite 40 documentary and artistic panels depicting survivors, 45 altogether, from the DC area, especially Montgomery County, and which also share some of their experience in the World War II era. These panels are both distressing, chronicling suffering and grievous losses, and inspiring, with that struggle to live and then to thrive. Portraits is also a kind of speaker's bureau, with survivors providing firsthand testimony in person and now more often through Zoom to complement the exhibition. As we heard already, Portraits of Life was founded by and was the concept of Dr. Myrna Goldenberg, a Holocaust scholar, an emeritus professor at MC, and also my mentor. She was the founding director of the Paul Peck Humanities Institute, of which Portraits of Life is a branch. And she also started the annual tradition of the Holocaust commemoration. Holocaust education programs have received the unwavering and enthusiastic support of the current director of the PPHI, my dear colleague, Sarah Ducey. To learn more about portraits, or if you're interested in having a survivor speak at your school, educational organization, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me as the Portraits of Life and Holocaust Education coordinator at the college. Portraits of Life, the exhibition, has traveled to dozens of locations over the years since 2005. Government buildings, cultural centers, libraries, art galleries, places of worship, historical sites, and most often to schools, public and private, middle schools, high schools, community colleges, four-year undergraduate institutions, where it has been seen by and impacted many thousands of people over the years. As one viewer politely put it, and I paraphrase, it is a great starting point to have some difficult conversations about a very complicated past. The entire collection will be on display again this fall on the Rockville campus in the art building. The image that you see is from 2018, but we're gonna have a new exhibition in the fall. And please stay tuned for dates and related events, especially involving survivors. The most amazing part of my time with Portraits of Life has been working with the people behind the pictures, individuals who have dealt with unimaginable hardship and heartache, but through it all and until today have remained steadfast and positive. I cannot say enough good things about their commitment to speak about a traumatic past at great cost, certainly not to gain anything financial or for the sake of pity, but because people, especially young people, need to know what happened. And knowing that, to speak and stand up against hate and prejudice. For the many survivors that I've met over the years, and you can see some of them in the current slides, I have nothing but the highest respect. Now, I could continue talking about my association with Portraits of Life all night. I won't do that, and I don't wish to subject you to that. but rather I would like to briefly introduce our feature speaker, Mr. Peter Feigl. Mr. Feigl was born in Germany, and he will talk about how his family had to flee from Nazi persecution across Europe, from Germany to Austria to Belgium, and then France. Although his parents were deported ultimately to Auschwitz, he owes his remarkable survival and good fortune to some remarkable people who at great personal risk protected him, helped hide him, and enabled him to get to safety in Switzerland. The surviving documentation does not reflect very well on many French officials, bureaucrats, and police officers who demonstrated a callous willingness to carry out orders to round up and send people, even young children, to their deaths, even without direct German involvement. Anyway, you will hear about this and more from someone who lived it as an adolescent. Without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Peter, and please give him your undivided attention. You will not be disappointed, I promise.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having asked me to speak to you this evening. I am particularly moved by the fact that there are some 200 or more young students among the audience this evening. And my story, which is long and sometimes complicated, I will try to address it especially to the young people who probably are 11, 12, 13, 14 years of age, the age that I was at the time of the events that I'll be talking to you about tonight. So my name is Peter Feigl. I was born in 1929, and I'm 93 years old today, and tomorrow I will be 94. So what I'm trying to say to you here is that I was young enough, or rather, excuse me, I was old enough at the time to remember the things that I witnessed. And as you will find out, I wrote diaries, which also helped me remember all these events. So I was born in Berlin, Germany. My parents that you see right here, my father, Ernst Feigl, and my mother, Agnes, and I'm in the baby carriage already asking for attention. My father was a graduate mechanical engineer. He was actually an Austrian born in Vienna, but he was working in Berlin. My mother was born in Germany, and my parents both were what I would call upper middle class people. We enjoyed a very, very good life. At times I had a nanny who looked after me. In the summertime, we went to the beach very often, and sometimes to Switzerland and to Austria and to the mountains. So it was very, very good. Here you see me at about 4 or 5 years old. Hitler came to power in 1933. And of course, I should add here that my parents had absolutely nothing to do with religion. I was totally unaware of the fact that under Hitler, we were considered Jews not because of the temple we attended or the religious services that we went to, but they claimed that it was a matter of race. But I was totally ignorant of that. And in 1935, when I went to school for the first year, you see me here carrying the large cone filled with candy that's traditionally given to a student on his first school year. And this was in April of 1935. So I was 6 years old at this time. And for the past 2-3 years, I've been listening to propaganda on the radio, military marches, speeches. Everywhere you went, there were German swastika flags flying everywhere and people in uniform. And as a young boy, I really wanted to join all those people and participate in all that activity. But of course, as you will find out, this is not something that I was going to be able to do. Because on that very same school day, when I started, we received a first grade reader, and this one is entitled "Their Gift Pills," which means the poisonous mushroom. And you can see this mushroom, which every child in Europe is warned against touching or eating because they are very, very poisonous. It is depicted here with a Jewish nose, big nose, and it has a Star of David on its chest. And my teacher began to tell us in school that Jews were terrible, terrible people. They lie, they steal, they cheat, they molest children. They are just like vermin, and they should be eliminated, just like one would eliminate vermin. And of course, not knowing any better, at the age of 6, I was taught to hate Jews. And I had no idea at the time that as far as Hitler was concerned, I was one of those. Anyhow, I went through that first school, and the next year I spent briefly in Czechoslovakia with my parents. And the following year, in 1937, my father was transferred to his office in Austria, and he was back in Vienna, his hometown, and he was very, very happy there. And my parents at this point had a little conference, and they decided, look, here we are in Austria. Austria is about 95% Roman Catholic. They have a long history of hating Jews, anti-Semitism, and so forth. We've just come from Germany, and we've seen what happens over there. Why don't we have Peter baptized? So indeed, I was baptized in May of 1937 at the age of 8. I went to catechism. I had my first communion. And occasionally I served as an altar boy, and I considered myself a Catholic, and I had no idea about what was going on in the world at that time around me. But about a year later, in March of 1938, Germany decided to annex Austria. And the Germans took over, and this was on the radio everywhere. And I had heard that Hitler was coming to Vienna, and I ran away from home that morning because I wanted to see Hitler. I had heard so much about him while I was in Germany. So I was in a big crowd of people around the city hall waiting for Hitler to appear. And when we were all there shouting, hundreds of thousands of people yelling, "Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer," which means one people, one empire, and one leader. Führer is a leader. And Hitler passed himself off as the leader of Germany. And he achieved that position because Germany had gone through a difficult time after the First World War with high inflation, with big unemployment throughout the country, a feeling of having been reduced to a losing power. And here is this man, Hitler, promising to put people in jobs, to provide good food and put it on the table for them, put them into snazzy uniforms. And he was going to make Germany great again and the most powerful country in Europe. And people just swallowed this hook, line, and sinker, and followed everything that he was saying. Now, at this time, I saw Hitler and I went home. I had been away for nearly 4 hours at that time. And when I came home, my mother was furious. And she yelled at me and she said, "Where have you been?" And I told her very proudly, "I saw our Führer." And my mother slapped me left and right and said, "He is not our Führer, and don't you ever forget it." I was very confused at the time. I really didn't understand it. But within about 10 days, we packed one suitcase each, my mother, my father, and I, and we took a train and we went to Belgium. In fact, we were fleeing, and my parents were leaving behind all of their possessions, their furniture, their silverware, their artwork, everything that they had. And we went to Belgium, and I had to leave behind my electric train set and my scooter and my toy lead soldiers. So I was very upset. I didn't realize how much more serious this was to my parents. We wound up in a small furnished one-room apartment in Brussels. And now I had to confront the fact that I found myself in a school where I did not speak the language, and I was forced to learn French. And in Belgium, there's a second official language, Flemish. I had to learn that as well. But within 6 months, I had gotten used to it, and I was speaking French pretty well, and I had made friends among my schoolmates. And there were rumors circulating for some time already about a possible war in Europe. But my parents always said, we don't have to worry about a war coming because we are in a neutral country. And if the war comes, we are safe in Belgium. Well, this went on. In September of 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and this was the beginning of the Second World War. And again, we were safe in Belgium, nothing to worry about, until the 10th of May of 1940, when all of a sudden the air raid sirens went off, and we learned that Hitler, Germany, had invaded Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg. And my father wanted to go to his office that morning in order to pay to his employees whatever money was due to them. And on the way to the office, he was arrested by the Belgian police, who saw that he had a German passport, and he was immediately arrested and suspected of being a spy or a paratrooper that had been dropped into Belgium and was attacking the country. So my mother and I were able to visit my father. And about 3 days later, he told my mother to take Peter and take your mother, in other words, my grandmother, and leave immediately because you don't want to get caught between two armies. The Germans were coming from the east. The British and the French were coming to help the Belgians from the west side. So we fled, again, carrying only whatever we were able to carry. And with hundreds of thousands of people, we fled Belgium and headed to France. It took us about 10 days to get there. While marching, hitchhiking, and whatever way we could, we were being machine gunned about every 20 minutes or so by German dive bombers. And whenever that happened, we would jump into the nearest ditch to protect ourselves. And I would look up at those airplanes. Remember, I'm now 11 years old. And the one thing that I could think of, the only thing I thought of, when I grow up, I want to be a pilot, and I want to sit there with a machine gun and go ta 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 ta. That must be a lot of fun. I was very stupid. I didn't realize that the cow that dropped dead next to me was hit by one of those bullets from that airplane. Anyhow, when we arrived in Paris, where my mother's sister lived, within a few minutes, within 2 hours, the air raid sirens went off, and my mother decided it was too dangerous for us to remain in Paris. So we fled further south to France, to a town called Bordeaux. And there, my mother, having been raised as a German, always to observe the law, went to report to the police. And she said, here I am. And the policeman said, now let me see, madame. You are born in Germany, and you married an Austrian. That makes you an Austrian, but there's no more Austria. And you're coming from Belgium, and you're here with your mother and with your son, and you don't have a visa, so you don't belong here. I don't know what to do with you. So go to the gendarmerie, which is the national police. The same thing happened there. He said, go to the prefecture, which is sort of the civil government of that area. And the other man said, oh, madame, I know what we should do with people like you. You're going to take a train and you're going to go to a town called Oloron-Sainte-Marie, which is near the Spanish border. We have experts who know just what to do with you. So indeed, we took the train. And when we arrived in Oloron, the train was surrounded by French policemen with machine guns. And we were loaded onto trucks. And about 20 minutes later, we were dumped into a French concentration camp. The camp was called Gurs. It was a camp that had the capacity of holding some 14,000 prisoners. And we lived 60 people to a barrack. There were no beds there. We slept on the floor, merely on straw. Notwithstanding, there were bed bugs, as well as fleas and body lice. We had next to nothing to eat. We received for breakfast some lukewarm water and one slice of bread. For lunch, you got another slice of bread. and maybe some soup in which you might see 3 or 4 slices of carrots floating. That was a big deal to get actually vegetables. And then in the evening, we had a repeat of what happened at lunchtime. There were no facilities inside the barrack where you could wash. There was a single cold water faucet outside the barrack. And the toilets, called latrines, were located about 150 yards away. And those were open pits where you just balanced yourself on a beam that was hanging there. It was an awful place. And there were people going from young babies to people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And many of them were dying in that camp. About 6 weeks later, France surrendered and signed an armistice with Germany. And my mother learned that a German inspection team was coming to the camp in order to see whether there were any Germans there. And so my mother positioned herself at the entrance of the camp. And when she saw the commander there, she jumped forward with her passport in her hand, and she yelled, "Heil Hitler, I am a citizen of the great Third Reich. I have been held here by these no good Frenchmen, together with my daughter and my son. I demand to be released immediately." And the German officer looked at my mother's passport, and he ordered the French commander to call a taxi for us. And 20 minutes later, we were out of there. Well, we couldn't go to Spain, so the cab driver took us north until we came to a town called Osh. And in that town, the cab driver said he couldn't go any further because the Germans were on the other side of town. So he got out of the cab, and my mother knocked on the door of a big red brick building, and a Catholic nun opened the door. My mother explained our situation, and the nun said to my mother, "We will help you." This was the first person that we came across who did the right thing and who decided to help people who were in need. That nun put my mother in contact with a small food distribution center in Osh. The center was run by American Quakers. That has nothing to do with Quaker Oats. Quakers are a religious denomination, a very small one. There are only about 350,000 of them throughout the entire world. But the amount of good that they do is totally disproportionate to their numbers. And they ran this place together with the Swiss Red Cross, and they provided my mother with a part-time job. And with that, we received permission to remain in town, settled there. My father was able to join us. He had also been sent to a French concentration camp. He was able to join us in March of 1941. 41. And my father was about 16 years older than my mother. He was in his mid-50s. He had developed heart trouble, and he was essentially released on a 30-day convalescence leave because they thought that he wasn't going to live much longer than that. Anyhow, my father was able to settle there. I went to school in France, and during the summer, I was sent to a Quaker camp, thanks to my mother's position there. A Quaker camp located about 25 miles away from Osh in the summer of 1942. Now, at that time, there were rumors around that the French were rounding up Jews in France, and they were turning them over to the Germans. And but in this summer camp, which was run again by the Quakers, the food, we had some good food there. We were all obsessed with food because during that time, the food was strictly rationed, and food was the only thing that we were thinking of at the time. Anyhow, I was there, and in the middle of August of 1942, I am now 13. All of a sudden, my father appeared on a bicycle, and he handed me a small pouch, and he told me, "Peter, I want you to keep this." As he climbed back on his bicycle, because he had to go back to Osh, because according to the Vichy anti-Jewish laws, there was a curfew, and Jews were not allowed to be on the streets after dark. So as he disappeared from my view, I had the horrible feeling that this is the last time that I will ever see him. And indeed, it wasn't long after that my father, I was notified by the lady in charge of the summer camp, a very devout Catholic lady who took me to 7 o'clock mass frequently, every morning. She called me in and she told me that she had just learned that my parents were arrested on the 26th of August, the day before. But not to worry, she's going to organize a novena and surely my parents will be returned to me after that. Shortly thereafter, the French police came and tried to arrest me. Mrs. Cavaillon protected me and made them believe that I was too sick to be moved. She contacted the Quakers and told them, I have a young boy on my hands who is Jewish. Please help him. I cannot keep him any longer. I don't know when the police will come and arrest him. And the Quakers then decided that they would incorporate me in a group of some 500 orphan children that were allowed to go to the United States. And there was an exchange of letter. I had to fill out some forms to get a visa for America. And when it asked for my religion, I put down Catholic. And the Quakers came back and said, we're not trying to save Catholics, we're trying to save Jewish children. And Mrs. Cavaillon wrote back and said, no, you don't understand. When the police comes here and I show them Peter's baptismal certificate, they tell me that it's worthless as far as the Vichy government is concerned. This child is Jewish. So I ultimately was taken by Mrs. Cavaillon to Marseille on the coast of southern France, from where the ship was supposed to leave in late November, somewhere around the 24th, 26th, 27th of November. And I arrived in Marseille on the 6th of November. And 4 days later, the Allies landed in North Africa. And with that, the Germans occupied the so-called free zone of France. And at that point, I realized that I probably would never make it to the United States, because the first thing that the Germans did was to close the port and stop any ship in or out of the port of Marseille. So then I was again helped to go to a small mountain village called Le Chambon, again by the Quakers. And when I arrived there, I forgot to mention, very important, on this 27th of August, when I learned that my parents had been arrested, that is the day that I started writing a diary dedicated to them. And I reported every day in my diary what was happening to me. So I had this diary with me. And when I came to Le Chambon on the 15th of January, it was high up in the mountain at about 3,500 feet. It was very cold, snow and ice. A young man met me there. His name was Daniel Trocmé. And Daniel Trocmé then was about 26 or 27 years old. And he was in charge of a home that sheltered some 23, 24 children. We hiked for about 2 hours before we got to this home called Les Grillons, that's French for crickets. And I was there protected by the people in Le Chambon. Le Chambon is a very unusual village in France because France is predominantly Catholic, but this village and the surrounding area, these were primarily Protestants. Many of them were evangelical Christians, and they are fundamentalists. They strongly believed in their Bible, and there was a documentary made in Le Chambon about what happened there. And the producer of that film, the film is entitled Weapons of the Spirit, he stops an elderly lady who is shuffling towards a temple or a church, and he says, but Madame, why did you do this? This was against the law of Vichy. You could have been arrested and killed or shot for doing this. And your family could have been arrested. And she said in the most casual way, tapping the Bible in the crook of her arm, it says in the Bible that if someone is sick, you try to bring them cheer. If someone is hungry, you ask them to table, and you share what food you have. If someone needs shelter, you provide them with shelter. And so the people of Le Chambon and the surrounding area, some 5,000 people, actually saved some 5,000 refugees, of whom some 5,000, some 3,500 were Jewish refugees. The people did this at great personal risk, and they did this also by sharing the small amount of food that they had, and whatever they had, they shared. And these are wonderful people, good people who did the right thing. And if it hadn't been for people like that, I wouldn't be here today speaking to you. And I had the good fortune of meeting some more people who did the right thing. So here is a group picture of the 20-some people that were in that house in the background, the cricket house. And I am here under the tree there. That's me. And there's Daniel Tokme back here. And you see some of those kids. We ranged in age from about age 4 for the youngest up to about 18 and almost 19 for the oldest. While in Le Chambon, Daniel Tokme was arrested in June of 1940. We're now in 1943. In June of 43, he was arrested. And because of that, shortly after that, they had to close the cricket house. So we were provided with false identity by the Quakers in that village. Excuse me, not by the Quakers, by the people in the village. And I got a false identity, and I was named Pierre Fesson. And this is my identity card picture. And here I am 14 and a half. And together with other kids, for instance, one of my good friends, Paul, his real name was Paul Fogelman, and his false name was Paul Forel, also a false name. The two of us, together with 3 other kids, were sent to a French boarding school in a town called Figeac. And there too, the principal in that school was hiding some 5 or more Jewish children, and he also did so at great personal risk. So, fortunately, I was able to stay in that town. My first diary having been confiscated in Le Chambon, I started a second diary in Figeac on the 1st of January of 1944, again recording everything that was happening to me. And in May of 1944, specifically on the 22nd of May, a German SS troop marched into town and ordered all the males to report for assignment to a hard labor detachment. At this point, I was smart enough to hide, and I was able to hide in the belfry of the church that was adjoining the high school. And after 24 hours, when I came down from there, I was helped by some French Jewish Boy Scouts who told me it was too dangerous for me to remain there. And they helped me. I joined a group of children who was escorted towards the Swiss border, and I was able to cross into Switzerland over the barbed wire fences. And I made a sketch of that in my diary, showing France on the bottom here. And then I climbed over the first barbed wire fence into no man's land, and on the other side, the Swiss barbed wire fence into Switzerland. There, I was arrested by Swiss police and interrogated. And when I showed them my baptismal certificate, they said, Monsieur Catholic, bienvenue en Suisse. So you're a Catholic, welcome to Switzerland. And for me, this is my mugshot from the Swiss police. I was now safe in Switzerland. And again, it wasn't until many years later that I found out what happened to my parents. They actually wound up in Auschwitz, where they arrived 2 days after leaving Paris. They arrived on the 6th of September and were killed on arrival there. Here is the first time that I found an official listing in a document showing all the people that were on the same convoy number 28 that left Paris. In conclusion, I would like to say this to you. You might be asking yourself, what on earth does Peter's story have to do with me? And the answer to that is this. There isn't anyone among you students who hasn't at one time or another witnessed someone being bullied, or was the bully, or bullied, or was standing by when someone was being bullied. And I'm here to tell you today that when this happens, the next time that you see it, you must stop it immediately. It behooves you to do so. Why? Two good reasons. First, because it is the right thing to do. And if that's not enough, the second reason is if you don't, you might be the next victim that is selected and might get persecuted. I remember I told you I was taught to hate Jews. There are people who hate other people because of maybe they speak with a foreign accent, they have a darker skin color, they're too fat or too thin, they wear the wrong clothes, whatever the reason. Maybe someone will come along, just like Hitler. Whenever he couldn't fulfill a promise, he needed someone to blame. You need a scapegoat. And that scapegoat in Germany was the Jews. They were less than 1% of the total population. So you may be the scapegoat the next time around because you have freckles or whatever the reason is. And that is why you need to stop it. After the war, a Protestant minister, Niemöller, summarized the whole situation in a beautiful way. He was one of the few Protestants who spoke up at the time and objected to what Hitler was doing. And for that, he was sent to a camp, but he fortunately survived. And he summed it up in this way. When they came to arrest the unionist next door, I kept quiet. I'm not a unionist. When they came to arrest the communists, I kept quiet. I'm not a communist. When they came and arrested the Jews, I also kept quiet. I'm not a Jew. And when they came to arrest me, there was no one left to speak up on my behalf. And that is the message that I'm trying to convey to you. The next time you see an injustice being committed, speak up, stand up, speak up, and stop it right there. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Molly Donnelly, Director of the MC Chamber Singers. We will be performing the third movement from the Songs of Children, a cantata composed by Robert Convery, on poems written by children while interned at the Nazi concentration camp in Terezin, Czechoslovakia, between 1942 and 1944. The composer wrote in his foreword to the score, "The cantata was composed in memory of all children who perished in the Holocaust. The purpose of this work was to give accessible musical voice to the poetry, that it be performed in schools as an historically instructive vehicle. I have placed at the beginning of the cantata a passage from Deuteronomy, which more eloquently states the purpose of Songs of Children. Only take heed and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your hearts all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. Of the 15,000 children deported from Terezin, which was then called Theresienstadt, to the Nazi death camp Auschwitz, only 100 children survived, none under the age of 14.
On a sunny evening, on a purple sunshot evening, under wide flowering chestnut trees, upon the threshold full of dust. Yesterday, today, the days are all like these. Trees flower forth in beauty, lovely to their very wood, all gnarled and old. Then I am half afraid to peer into their crowns of green and gold. The sun has made a veil of gold, so lovely that my body aches. Above, the heavens shriek with blue, convinced I've smiled by some mistake. The world's abloom and seems to smile. I want to fly, but where, how high? If in barbed wire things can bloom, why couldn't I? I will not die.
That was amazing. I wanted to go back to thank our speaker, Peter Feigl, for his presentation and for sharing some of the salient moments of his life story and the important messages that he imparted. It cannot be easy to reflect back on such a painful time in your life, but your resilience and your memory are impressive and inspiring. Thank you again, Peter. We appreciate it. Thank you. Now, for me, comes the most poignant and emotional part of the program, believe it or not, that is reading the names of the Portraits of Life Holocaust survivors who are no longer with us. When Portraits of Life was first exhibited in 2005, there were 45 individuals who were part of the program, represented on 37 different panels. Today, only 12, according to my latest calculations, are still with us. As my good friend and portrait survivor Manny Mandel has put it so succinctly, survivors of the Holocaust are becoming a diminishing resource, one that we should not take for granted. Just since the beginning of this year, we have lost 3 more of our dear friends, as I will be noting shortly. We refer to all those I mentioned, as being of blessed memory. I will state their names while showing a picture of them. Some I knew very, very well. Others, not as much, but all were irreplaceable members of this community. Fanny Eisenberg, Bella Mishkinsky-Bermanis, and Irene Glassberg, Eva Blumberg, Beatrice Carasso, Isaac and Yona Dickmann, Erika Eckstud, Eva Ehrlich, Manya Friedman, Fritz Gluckstein, Hannah Green, Henry Greenbaum, Yuda Levy and Ruth Horwitz, Rosette Koenig, Velik and Hinta Luxembourg, Peter Masters, Leon and Nina Merrick, Eugene Miller, Sylvia Rosinas, who I knew very well as an enthusiastic participant of portraits, especially when it meant talking to students. And she shared her extraordinary experience as a rare child survivor of the notorious Lodz Ghetto. She passed away a few weeks ago after a long illness. Rita Rubenstein. Rita has been a regular at our commemorations for years, in person and last year on Zoom. She confirmed with me in early February, early this month, that she planned to be here tonight. Then we learned less than a week later that she was gone. It is a reminder of how fragile life is. Charlene Schief, Esther Sindrovich, Flora Singer, Regina and Sam Spiegel, Harriet Steinhorn Roth, Herman and Susan Taub. Susan, like her husband, was very prominent in the survivor community, but whom I personally only knew just a little bit. She passed just days into the new year. And Freddie Traum, a true mensch. Please keep these amazing people in your thoughts. Thank you.
He doesn't know the world at all, who stays in his nest and doesn't go out. He doesn't know what birds know best, nor what I want to sing about, that the world is full of loveliness. When dewdrops sparkle in the grass, and earth's aflood with morning light, a blackbird sings upon a bush to greet the dawning after night. Then I know how fine it is to live. Hey, try to open up your heart to beauty. Go to the woods someday and weave a wreath of memory there. Then if tears obscure your way, you'll know how wonderful it is to be alive.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to make a few remarks of thanks. Would very much like to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Peter Feigl, as well as the other Holocaust survivors who were here this evening with us to participate in our candle lighting service. We are grateful to composer Robert Convery for granting permission to feature his Songs of Children, a cantata that he wrote in memory of all children who perished in the Holocaust. I'd like to recognize the poems written by the anonymous children of the Terezin concentration camp. They wrote those poems that you heard this evening, and those children have all certainly perished. Fewer than 100 lived out of 15,000. The Montgomery College Foundation, we're grateful to them for their ongoing support of the Paul Peck Humanities Institute and our Holocaust education programming. And we are also grateful to Montgomery Television for all that they do. This program will be produced and available on YouTube. We also were delighted to be able to share with you the Montgomery College Chamber Singers. They were under the direction of Dr. Molly Donnelly. And also thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Rockville that hosted the rehearsal and filming of the music video. Later in April, this same group will perform at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Rockville. In April, find them. I think you'll find it to be very compelling. So thank you. Thank you for participating in our annual commemoration and recognizing both the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. We were grateful that you could spend time with us.